It's a very important. It's a good way for the hearing to see the deaf work, because often it's not that people don't care. It's just people, they don't know. When people don't know, they can't get involved. And so when you have a deaf person come up and preach, and people look at, realize, and feel, the roles are reversed, and they realize the importance of need for interpreters and to have a deaf ministry. Okay. They just let me know we still have plenty of the deaf directories in the back. So if you haven't got a copy, or you want to get an extra one, go and pick it up. When we're done here. In just a minute, Dennis is going to come up and give us our last lesson for workshop, and then we will have a business meeting where we're going to be accepting bids for future workshops, and Frank will come up at that time. Is there any other announcements that need to be made? Anything else? Right? Yes. Yeah. When we close, make sure to pray for everybody to have a safe trip home. I know some of y'all a long travel back. Yep. California. I thought you wanted. Anything else you need to announce? Okay. In just a minute, I'm going to ask Dennis to come up. Can you come here? Just look at this. I'll move this out of the way in a second, but is it supposed to be on slide 7? I know it's black, but...
You ready? I want to thank Frank for the invitation to come and to be a part of this workshop. The last time that I went to the workshop was 32 years ago. So it's been a long time. I spent 12 years in working full-time with the deaf, and they were some of the best years of my life. And I want all of you to know that you, deaf people, have really blessed my life, my family, in so many wonderful ways. And I will always be thankful to God that I had the opportunity to meet, to work with, and to learn to love deaf people. So I thank you for this time to come and to talk a little bit about the future of deaf work. When Frank asked me to speak about looking forward, it was kind of hard for me to think how to do that because I've been away from deaf work for so many years. But I've been doing a lot of thinking, talking to you, and what I see here has been very encouraging to me. When I came, I thought I would see a small group of maybe 30 or 40 people. This is wonderful to see all of you here, and so I thank you, and I'm very much encouraged by what I see. So I thank you for some of the best years of my life, and I thank you for the opportunity to work with deaf people. If you'll come. Okay. Okay, if you would to read. The thing that I love about this story, of course, it's the story of a deaf man being healed by Jesus. There's a couple of points that I want to make, and then we'll progress. But it's what a wonderful way to look at deaf work. It says here that there were some people that brought a man to him who was deaf. I imagine these people were hearing people. I'm always thankful for hearing people that take an interest to the deaf. And as we think about deaf work growing, we're always going to need good hearing people that know about the deaf and that love the deaf. I don't know if the people that brought him to Jesus, I don't know, maybe it was his mom and dad. Maybe it was some family member, maybe it was a neighbor. But we always need hearing people to take an interest in the deaf. And so wherever we go in these churches, when we see hearing people interested in the deaf, that's very important in the work of evangelizing deaf people. But I'm always thankful to my hearing brethren that show an interest in the deaf. Any work that I've gone, people come to me, hearing people, and they're always so interested in sign language. Even now, people ask my wife or I about signs. They're very curious about the deaf and about how you all make it in life. Sometimes they get the deaf confused with, they think that the deaf Bible is in Braille. So they don't understand the deaf world very, very well. But as they go along and they learn, they find out about you wonderful people. And so we always need that. We always need some people that want to bring deaf people to Jesus. They want to invite a neighbor who have deaf children to come to church, to have maybe a deaf person that works for them, with them at work, to invite that deaf person to come to church or to study about Jesus. We always need that as we, in order for deaf evangelism to grow. Here we see that Jesus led the man away from the people to be alone with him. Deaf people need their time with Jesus. You need your time to study and to learn about the Lord. And I'm thankful that you are interested in Jesus and that people want to study the Bible, deaf and hearing, that want to study the Bible, and for that we are always thankful for that. Jesus opened this man's ears. I wish that we could open the ears of the deaf today. And as much as medical technology has improved, we've still not learned how to give the deaf back their hearing. But we can open your hearts and your minds to the teachings of Jesus. And Jesus can open your hearts to salvation, can open your hearts to the grace of God. You still need your time with the Lord, just like everyone else. We know that Jesus came in contact with many people, but he took the time to take this deaf man aside and to open his ears. And we need for every deaf person in America to have their time with Jesus, to learn about him, to have their ears open to the saving gospel of Jesus Christ, and to learn what Jesus did for them on the cross. So we are certainly thankful for the blessings of this story and for what it means to us. Now, as we begin to look forward and begin to think about the future, where does deaf work go? As I begin thinking about that, the very first thing that I begin to realize and that I want all of you to remember, as we look forward, we need to remember the past, because deaf work has a great past, and everyone needs to understand how this came to be. What got us here? How did we get to this point? And we need to remember the great leaders and the great past that we have in the Lord's church. Throughout the 1800s, there were occasional stories of where restoration preachers met a deaf person. And by writing or by pointing to scriptures in some way, they were able to baptize someone who was deaf. But deaf work did not really get off to a organized start probably until 1930, when a wonderful Christian lady by the name of Gladys Holland in Austin, Texas, was teaching a children's Bible class in the church there. And a little girl began to attend her Bible class, and she began to bring with her her deaf brother and sister. And Gladys thought that it was sad that those children had to sit there and not understand what was happening. And so Gladys began to study sign language, began to learn how to teach those children. And from that beginning, we find the work in Austin growing to the point, as many of you know, the Austin church, a deaf church in Austin, became a congregation of the deaf that had their own building, grew, and some of us were blessed to go to a workshop there many years ago. There were other great leaders then that began to grow out of this movement. Leander Moore in Nashville was very prominent in beginning deaf work in that part of the country. Sam Roach, a young deaf college student in Harding, probably did as much, if not more, to spread deaf work across the country and across the world than maybe anyone. Sam started the Sign Language Club in Searcy at Harding University. And it was through that sign language club that Sam Hester learned to sign, and Sam then taught me about deaf work. So even my roots really go back to Sam Roach. Many years ago, I was in Thailand doing some mission work in Thailand. And I drove up north of Thailand into a large city, and who did I run into but Sam Roach? Sam went all around the world starting deaf works. The deaf work in Singapore began by Sam Roach. Sam did a great work. Gordon Crocker. I met Gordon many years ago. He established a lot of the congregations and deaf works in Texas in the 1950s. In Florida, Earl Birdwell, a very sweet man that I met on occasions, helped start a lot of the deaf work in the Floridas in the 1950s. Lloyd Williams, I can't talk about great deaf preachers without talking about Lloyd Williams. I traveled a lot with Lloyd, spent a lot of time with him. He was quite a character. Those of you that knew him knew he was quite a character. I asked Lloyd one time, I said, what do you look forward to the most when you get to heaven? And he said, I mostly look forward to singing. Lloyd loved to sing, and he would sing with his voice, and it was not very clear, but it was beautiful. And when I enter those pearly gates someday, I want to be standing next to Lloyd Williams and listening to him sing. These men were great pioneers. We have a couple of the great old men of deaf work with us in our own Billy Level and Frank Rushing. These were the first two deaf men I ever met. I went to a workshop in Huntsville, and Billy was teaching. I met Frank. I went to Frank's house, to his home, and I met his children. Frank, you had a deaf dog. I remember you had a dog that was deaf, a Dalmatian, yes. These men helped lay a tremendous foundation. And that is why we are here today, is because these people of the past had a love for the deaf, and they began deaf work, and they reached deaf men with the gospel. And it is upon that foundation that we will build the future. It is upon these men and these women that did such great work for the deaf in the 30s and 40s and 50s that we will build a great future. It's the foundation that we build upon today. And without them, without those great people, we would not be here today. Secondly, we look forward to deaf work because we have a new generation of deaf workers and leaders and deaf preachers. We are blessed now to be going into a second and third generations of these families that were involved in deaf work. And for that we are certainly thankful. The children of these great leaders are now leading deaf work across America and around the world. My interpreter here, Miss Francis, I knew her when she was just this tall. Oh, she still is just this tall. I remember her just a little girl, running around with her sisters. Becky Level, where's Becky? Becky back here. These were kids that were just running around camp. Dennis Wilson. These were just kids that I remembered at deaf camp, running around having a good time. And now these are the leaders that are leading the work among the deaf. These are second and third generation deaf Christians that have meant so much to the spread of the gospel and are doing great work in our deaf communities around the world. We're not just huddled together in the church, but we're out in the communities, and we're interpreting, and we're working, and we're spreading the gospel wherever we go, these people. We have second and third generation preachers that have come along and that are following in the footsteps of other great men. I was blessed to be a part of the Birmingham Bible School for the Deaf, BBSD. And while I was there, I had two young boys that wanted to preach, Mike and Leonard. We are I remember you guys when you were just young, when you had hair. I remember you back then, yes. You all are, it's that generation now, the men coming out of Sunset. We're building upon a foundation. And deaf work is stronger now than it's ever been because of the foundation that we're building on. Way back in the 40s and 50s, we were building a foundation, but now we're building on top, and it is growing and growing. And I'm very impressed by being here with just how strong the work is going and how strong deaf work is coming along. When I started working full-time with the deaf, I could only name 4 other full-time preachers for the deaf. But now, look, it's grown so much. Very encouraged, Randy, by the work going on here in Alabama. That's wonderful. That is fantastic. That wasn't happening 30 years ago. So it's really wonderful to see that kind of growth, to see the work that's being done and the kind of leadership that's coming along. I think the Lord's church is in a tremendous way. Paul wrote to the Corinthians. He said, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So we see that the early founders came along. And now this new generation is coming. And God is giving the increase. Deaf work is in good shape. And maybe in some ways doing better than our hearing brethren are doing. And so we are excited about the new generation of church workers and leaders, preachers, interpreters, teachers that are coming along and doing such wonderful work. So I think there is an exciting future out there. What does the future look like in deaf work? I think there is an exciting future there, and I want to give you 3 reasons why I think that. The opportunity to teach deaf people is better now than it has ever been. We have more opportunities to reach out to the deaf world and to the deaf community now than we ever did before, and I want to tell you why. First of all, because we have better educated deaf. The deaf world is better educated than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. When I first started and got into deaf work 40 years ago, quite often when I would knock on a deaf person's door, I would be talking to someone. Remember, we used to call them, we did a low verbal deaf, low verbal. These were deaf people that were raised on the farm. Many of them did not ever even go to school. They were using homemade signs. They did not have a very good education. And quite often you would work with deaf people who simply did not have a very large vocabulary, did not have much education. As you know, that's not true today. Deaf kids today are getting great education. You're going to your residential schools, or you have great public schools that are mainstreaming. So deaf children today are getting a good education. And not only that, they're then going to college. And they're learning how to get involved in technology and other areas. There's so many wonderful works that are available to the deaf now because their education is getting so much better. So we have the opportunity to teach the deaf better because we're all better educated. And so we can begin teaching them because of that. Secondly, there is better access to interpreters than there's ever been before. The deaf world has been made better as interpreters got better and became more accessible. I want to say that again. The deaf world has been made better as interpreters got better and more accessible. And I think all of you would agree with that. Interpreters have gotten so much better, better trained, certification, more accessible. Many years ago, if a deaf person wanted to go to the doctor, they would ask a member of the church that they knew if they would go with them, or many times they would have to go by themselves. That doesn't happen today. Now they just call the interpreting service, or they have other qualified services that are offering interpreters for communities. And so anywhere they go, interpreting is available. And so because of interpreters, we have more, of course, qualified interpreters in our church programs. and things of that nature. So the access to interpreters is everywhere for the deaf. So that opens up the world many times to deaf people and makes a normal life possible because great interpreters are there. So interpreters have greatly increased the opportunities in the deaf world. And that gives us then a greater access to teaching and reaching out to the deaf. And then thirdly and finally, we have better technology. The technology has improved so much, and while it has benefited everyone, I don't know of any group of people that has been more blessed by technology than the deaf. It's really wonderful whenever you see what all is happening out there. Did any of you, I'm sure some of you in this audience, I see some old faces out there, some gray hair. I'm sure some of you in this audience, did any of you ever have this big, old, ugly machine that was about that big that was called a TTY? Remember the old teletype machine? Yes. Oh, yeah, we all had those old machines in our homes. Look how technology has changed. Now you're holding all of that in your pocket and you're able to do all of the texting. We went to the little, what are these you would put the phone on? MCMs? TDDs that you would put it on. And then, of course, we got the computers. And then we got the smartphones. We were able to do texting. FaceTime. Any of you ever FaceTime? Of course. I mean, it's wonderful. FaceTime is great thing to do. So look at the technology, how it has improved your communication, how it has improved your ability to keep up with one another. I look at a PowerPoint now that preachers use in their teaching so that it makes the sermons more visual to the deaf. I learned a long time ago that deaf people, you learn everything through your eyes. And so things like PowerPoint helps you to in church services. I was being shown what they're doing over here with the green screen. That is amazing. That is wonderful. My goodness, technology has just increased in so many ways. And this congregation here, I tell you, you're cutting edge. You're using the newest and latest of things that are available. You also have greater access through translations. I was present, and some of you in this room were present in 1978 in Dallas, Texas, when the World Bible Translation Center opened that first box and presented to the deaf world the English translation for the deaf. It was the interpreter for that occasion was Bob Anderson. I remember it well. So the deaf translation has been a wonderful success. Opened up the scriptures to the deaf in a wonderful way. I just heard while I was here about the ASLV version, the audio-visual version, signed New Testament. I had not heard of that before. So many wonderful things are happening with technology, with Bible translations. The opportunity is so great, so wonderful now to go out and to reach deaf people. And so you have through better education, better access to interpreters, better technology, the future should be very bright in the deaf world and should be able to give wonderful opportunities for the church to reach out to the deaf and better contact the deaf and to serve them. So these things, I think, lead then to a greater future for the deaf. And now you can go have a seat, my dear. Thank you. As I close, I just want to say a few words. It is important that we go into all the world and preach the gospel to every person. And I think that Jesus meant the deaf too. And we have to open up the opportunities for deaf people to learn about Jesus, to open up their hearts and their minds to what Jesus did for them. I want deaf people to hear the words of Jesus as I heard them. I want the deaf world to feel the hammer blows that nailed Jesus to the cross like I have. And if deaf people are lost, let it be that they are lost because they rejected and refused to accept the gospel. Don't let deaf people be lost because they never heard the gospel story. Thank you. It's been a wonderful time to be with you, and God bless you all. I love you so much. Thank you. Oh, before I finish, I do need you again, sweetie, for just a minute. Sam Hester and I at Freed-Hardeman College worked together to do this deaf evangelism, the first 50 years, about the history of deaf work. This was published a long time ago. Some of you may not have it. It has tremendously valuable information in this. And if you're interested in the history of deaf work, the first 50 years, I have 3 copies of this left. And they go to the first $10. The first $10. Okay, $10 a piece for these, and they can be yours, okay? So I just have 3 left. Okay, $10. Years ago, years ago, boy, I tell you, I gotta have the money first. $10. I gotta have the money first. If you want more, if you want more, if you want a copy of this, Sam Hester may have some more. If you'll contact him at Freed-Hardeman University, or contact Ryan, it may have more of those books. But it's a tremendous work. Sam did most of the work. I did the editing. A lot of good pictures, history. So if you don't have that, you need to try to get that if you can. Now, I have this book that I wrote many years ago called Hand to Hand, The Church Reaching Out to the Deaf. And it's kind of about how you started deaf work and to help hearing people understand sign language, learning signs, the deaf culture, a few things like that. It's not a very in-depth work, but I think it still has good information. It's very old, but it has good information. And I have about 20 of these here, and they are free to the first ones that want to come. They're free to use, so just come get them. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.